Hey everybody, it's Will Bales from Team HyperShock. Today we're at Tiger Coating's largest North American facility. They're going to show us all behind the scenes of how they turn raw materials into high performance powders. Tiger Coatings invited us to Tiger Innovation Days, which is their customer symposium to show off all their new latest greatest products, new technologies that we're working on, and how customers can implement them into their own projects and designs. Additionally, they got to show off us, HyperShock, their new collaborator. And together, we actually just launched a product line that we curated together, BattleCoats. Once Tiger Innovation Days was done, and when all the customers were gone, we got a special behind-the-scenes tour. Okay, so a quick sidestep, what is powder coating? Powder coat is a thermoset resin that gets cured onto your part. So it's like paint on steroids. You take a powder, you spray it onto a part, that is put into an oven where it cures into this solid continuous coating. And it's not very thick, but it's way more heat resistant than normal paint is, way more chemical resistant. And in general, it's just a much tougher outer lining to your part. So Ryan, a process engineer at Tiger Coatings, brought us through the whole process from raw materials all the way to finished goods in a box.
I'm genuinely fascinated in the whole thing. So there's nothing too boring if you're willing to talk about it.
Absolutely. This is where our process starts ultimately. So we have our incoming raw materials. Could be 6 or 7 per product, up to 11 or 12.
So how big of a batch are you usually doing at once?
Normal large orders are about 1,000 kg per batch. It all depends on the order size, if it's custom, if it's a stock product, those sorts of things.
First, we started at the raw materials. This is where they're making the giant containers, vessels, cauldrons. Giant cauldrons. Cauldron full of powder.
We have hoppers with a lot of the very common large quantity type items.
The flour, if you will. The flour and the sugar.
Yeah.
Things that are always in there.
The big things to kind of see when he puts it in. That bar, that blue bar will continue to
Oh yeah,
up.
right. So you're constantly weighing the
So everything is weighed in. There's a tolerance on every single ingredient.
Continuing this cake analogy, all those small ingredients that turn your cake into a chocolate cake or a vanilla cake or a strawberry banana cream pie cake. All your smaller ingredients that define the color, some of the material properties, all these things that differ between product to product, those are batched behind the big cauldron, back down here.
there. So these are all the smaller subcomponents that don't make sense to measure out.
Your pigments, yeah, and we have basically anything that's less than 3 kilograms gets batched up down here. There's just a lot more controlled process down here, and just to make sure that that color and everything is right on it. So.
Right.
Once the world's largest mixing bowl is full of stuff, now they have to blend it all together in a nice homogeneous mix so that it's ready for the next step in processing.
Basically, as you'll see, the container will go in, lifts up, it flips upside down. You can kind of see the blades internal to the system. There's a few different tools that really get it mixed up.
Now that looks like a Battlebot part.
There you go, yeah, absolutely.
So Ryan here is showing us these giant mixing machines that are used to mash up everybody. Giant mixing machines that are used to mix all these batches.
Well, we have different mix cycles depending on the product and what we're doing.
I would have assumed it's just, throw it all together, mix it up a little, and all the day.
Yeah, you're kind of thinking of 1,000 kg, right? Well, a normal box of products 20 kg, so to get really that box to box consistently, you need a very good mix on it.
Right, that's a good point.
The next step was counterintuitive to me at the time, but makes sense in retrospect. This next step is what turns a random bucket full of powder into powder coating raw material.
So once it's finished mixing, it ends up coming and gets lifted up onto the second floor platform. We discharge it into a controlled feeder, feeds in the extruder stuff. So it comes out here, here's a cooling roller, so it squishes it between 2 drum rollers. You get it down to a flat stock.
Okay. It's really neat. So they extrude everything. I just want to talk about it. Extrusion, and I mentioned talking about tubing extrusion because that's what I'm familiar with through work as a medical device engineer. So when they're extruding it, they're heating it up, partly from just heaters, but also from the mechanical mixing and knurling and just kneading the dough here. Do you have dough and cakes? It's all this mixing makes heat molds forces all the materials together into a nice homogeneous mix, squirts it out the end of your extruder, and then they have these two cooled rollers that flatten it out, and then it turns into this kind of crackly, approximately 1/8 of an inch thick sheets of powder coat. Not really powder yet.
It'll basically come into a paint chip. So once it cools, it all cracks, so it rolls it down to a roughly 1 millimeter solid thick chip. It goes through a granulator to break it down into a little finer. So all that product is pneumatically conveyed up to our mill systems, and that's where it's obviously milled down to the particle size that we need.
Cool. At this step, they take those raw paint chips, grind them up into a fine powder, and pump them pneumatically up into the next floor to the next part of the process.
To me, all this is super fascinating.
Well, one more?
Sucker for manufacturing.
I know, I love it. Favorite thing to do is go visit plants.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
It was amazing walking through this whole factory, where going into a powder factory, that it would be all over the place. It would be an absolute mess.
It's surprising how sensitive some of this stuff can be to just environmental contamination. So we want to make sure everything's covered at all times.
Well, especially when you're running different colors, different materials, where you need to control the process. You don't want yellow flecks in your white paint.
And there are some products that are pretty impressive that it could be in a 1,000 kilogram batch, 10 grams of certain things could throw the whole thing.
Interesting.
Common thought is you go to a powder plant, it's going to be piles of powders everywhere. Given, that nature that all powder can be explosive, Tiger obviously has a very high standard for the cleanliness that they expect out of the operation.
Ryan accurately points out that's actually a safety hazard. Beyond just ingestion, it's a explosion risk. If you want to see some crazy videos, look up like grain silo explosions. Very scary. So they keep everything incredibly immaculate, and they have the world's largest hairnet, which I found hilarious. So it's probably 5 or 6 feet in diameter, and they apparently went around to different factories saying, we basically need a giant 5-foot hairnet. It's fantastic, it does the job, and it keeps all those powders in.
Find someone like a very big hairnet.
Yeah, exactly what it is.
And they got exactly what we wanted. But
on the second floor is where they filter out all the Goldilocks product. So everything that's perfect within the band of particle size goes straight to product. Anything that's too big gets reground down into smaller and smaller particles. And anything that's too small, they can actually reprocess, remelt, and re-extrude. So there's basically no loss in the whole process.
from the cyclone above, go through a double flap system into our sieve where it makes sure we get all the offsides out of the product. That's one of the best things about powder coating. Theoretically, there's no reason it couldn't be almost 100% used. Right, so everything can be recycled back into further products. There's a process as it's going. So,
and you're very methodical about keeping everything as closed as contained filtering as possible.
yeah.
The attention to detail and cleanliness at the factory really blew my mind. And it makes sense. Like, imagine you're working on a project and you want a nice, smooth, satin finish Miami white part. And all of a sudden, in the middle of it, there's a fleck of HyperShock yellow. That would kind of ruin the part. Well, I mean, it wouldn't ruin the part. I mean, yeah, come on. But if you want white, you can't have flecks of other stuff in it. And to be able to control all this while processing tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of powder.
Once it comes off, it's weighed at the actual system, and then the operator will close up the box, tape it, label it, and out the door.
Another testament to their commitment to cleanliness, in their packaging, you see this platen that comes down and you can see the powder coming out. Well, they also have a whole bunch of exhaust tubes, making sure that all that hyper fine particle dust doesn't just go all over the place and make the machine messy or cross-contaminate other products. Even right when it's just raw powder going into a bag, they're clean. It's really neat. From here, the boxes are loaded up and eventually go on a truck and straight to the customer.
Depending on the inspection plan, they'll sample it every so often.
Of course, throughout the process, they're constantly checking the product for material properties, consistency. So they have their own little powder coating station that I'm frankly very jealous of.
Hang some of our sample panels, spray the panels, put it in the oven depending on the cure time and temperature, and then they'll bring it up to QC for final review.
I need one of these. Is this in the gift shop?
Also at the facility, they have capabilities to do UV testing, saltwater spray testing, all sorts of stuff. And apparently, South Florida weather is the worst thing for powder coats. So we learned that just leaving stuff out on the beach here is a perfect test. So.
Oh yeah, we ultimately want to make sure it's gonna, fit the application they need.
Ryan showed us their process for durability testing, which is basically lifting a weight to a controlled height and dropping it and putting a little divot in a test article.
All right, let me drop it from, all right, so 40 centimeters, eh? Bam. Wow. It's a heck of a dent, but yeah, everything's good. Looks great. No peeling, no flaking, everything's stuck down.
We had our own plans for how to do a better test method. Thanks again to Ryan for showing us the whole process. Now we have a better understanding of what goes into making these powders, like what we have in BattleCoats. But Will, what are BattleCoats, you say? Oh, well, if you've been living under a rock, you would realize. Where's our samples? They could be in the charger box. BattleCoats are the world's best curated collection of powder coating finishes. Thanks for joining us. We had a blast going through the whole factory and seeing Tiger Innovation Days and learning about all this processing and what really goes into making these so good. And we can't wait to show you all the new stuff we're gonna do with these beautiful colors and all these wonderful finishes. And there's a lot coming down the pipe. So stay tuned and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.